Now, as it stands, Oscar Pistorius is at home with family, but he will probably only have, say, about 15 days of respite, because we know that there'll be proceedings in the Supreme Court of Appeal. Is that correct?
Yes, that has to still be argued. And I must just stress, it's not another trial. It's based on the evidence already presented. All of that evidence will have been typed. Heads of argument are submitted by the state and the defense, and then it's argued in front of the Supreme Court of Appeal. It could take a day, maybe 2 days, or longer if the judges decide they need more time to deliberate on the various arguments and on the evidence presented. If they decide to change the conviction from manslaughter or culpable homicide, as it's called in South Africa, to one of murder, then he can possibly be resentenced. They could look at the sentence afresh, call for submissions on sentence. Maybe they can even send the case back to the North Gauteng High Court to look at sentence. And then obviously submissions and evidence could be presented on sentence again. But so much evidence has already been presented on sentence. So the Supreme Court of Appeal have all his personal facts. They have all the facts of the case. They've got all the submissions made by both the state and the defense during the sentencing stage. So that is the judges of the Supreme Court of Appeal. If they feel this is a sentence that must be increased because they changed the conviction, and culpable homicide is sentenced, or an offender for a culpable homicide case is usually sentenced differently to one who's convicted of murder, because murder is by definition far more serious. But then there have been people who've been convicted of murder who have received correctional supervision along the lines that Oscar has been sentenced to. So, we don't know. I mean, there are so many kind of variables here. My feeling has always been that if you look at the facts, 4 shots into a tiny little toilet, knowing that there's somebody behind the door, and that person isn't attacking Oscar, well, does that not really equal murder? I mean, one doesn't have to be a fantastic lawyer to determine that.
And that's obviously what the state feels too.
Yes, and I believe they have a fairly good argument based on the facts of the case. There's, in our law, if you shoot somebody knowingly and your intention is to defend yourself, but you're not acting in a situation of defense. In other words, there's no threat. Nobody's coming at you. There's no imminent threat. And, one must remember that, the psychological aspect has to come in as well. What is the person, what is Oscar thinking? People are attacked in their homes. So the court has to look at all of that. But I mean, there was no threat and there was no imminent threat. So did he, in fact, not exceed what he was entitled to do? And therefore, does that not, equal, all add up to a charge of murder, intentionally shooting the so-called intruder?
Now, let's speak a little bit about the arguments that will happen at the Supreme Court of Appeal. As we understand it, it would have to be arguments of law and not necessarily evidence.
Well, the court has to look, when you look at law, it has to be looked at from the perspective of what is the evidence presented to the court. So you can look at, what is the definition of culpable homicide, what's the definition of murder, the whole issue of dolus eventualis, which everybody knows about now, and then look at what are the facts. Do those facts fit into, is it murder? Has the state proved that beyond a reasonable doubt? Either a direct intent or by way of dolus eventualis. And, do the facts amount to a situation where beyond a reasonable doubt the state has proved whatever the charge is. So the court can determine, now this is really a situation of dolus eventualis, redefine, so everybody's very clear on it. But again, you get back to the facts. What are the facts? 4 shots into a door, he thought there was an intruder there, he thought the intruder was about to attack him, and do the facts actually bear that out?
William Booth, thank you so much for explaining this to us today.
Thank you.